Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Lucas Carver had spent 30 years exposing corruption as an investigative journalist before retiring to a quiet life in suburban Connecticut. At 62, his sharp eyes hadn't dulled, nor had his instinct for when something was wrong. That instinct kicked in the moment his son Michael called that October afternoon. "Dad, I need a favor." Michael's voice carried an edge Lucas recognized, the same tension that used to precede bad news. "Can you pick up Emma and Jack from Julia's parents' house? I'm stuck in court, and Julia's not answering her phone." Lucas frowned, setting down the book he'd been reading. "She's not answering? That's not like her." "I know. She's been different lately. Distant. We had a fight last week, and she took the kids to her parents' place in Westport. Said she needed space." Michael paused. "I'm probably overreacting, but I'd feel better if you got the kids. The Taylors and I aren't exactly on speaking terms right now." "What happened?" "Long story. I'll explain later. Can you go?" Lucas grabbed his keys. "I'm already heading out." The drive to Westport took 40 minutes, giving Lucas time to think. Michael and Julia had been married for 8 years, and while no marriage was perfect, they'd seemed solid. Emma was 7, Jack was 5, good kids who deserved stability. Lucas had met Julia's parents, Philip and Hannah Taylor, only a handful of times. They'd always been polite but cold, the kind of people who smiled without warmth and spoke in carefully measured words. Philip was a retired pharmaceutical executive, Hannah a former hospital administrator. They lived in an old colonial that screamed old money and older secrets. When Lucas pulled up to the Taylor house, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. The place looked pristine, almost sterile. He walked up the stone path and rang the doorbell. No answer. He rang again, waited, then knocked firmly. Still nothing. Lucas's instinct flared. He moved along the porch, peering through the front windows. The curtains were drawn, but through a gap in the dining room window, he caught a glimpse that made his blood run cold. Emma and Jack sat slumped in chairs at the dining table, their heads lolling forward. An older woman, Hannah Taylor, stood over them with a syringe in her hand. Another figure, younger, moved in the background, gathering papers from the table into a briefcase. Lucas's hand went to his phone, fingers already dialing 911 when the front door swung open. Philip Taylor stood in the doorway, tall and silver-haired, dressed in a cardigan that belonged in a country club catalog. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Mr. Carver, I thought I heard someone out here. What the hell are you doing to my grandchildren?" Lucas's voice was low and dangerous. Philip glanced back into the house, then stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. "I understand you're concerned, but before you make that call, you should know that your daughter-in-law stole $400,000 from us last night and vanished. We have every reason to believe she's fleeing the country." Lucas's finger hovered over the call button. "What?" "Julia has been helping us with some business matters. Private pharmaceutical consulting. Last night, she accessed our accounts and emptied them. She also took certain documents that could cause significant problems if they fall into the wrong hands." Philip's tone was eerily reasonable. "The children are fine. We've simply given them something to help them rest while we sort this out. But if you call the police, Mr. Carver, things will become very complicated very quickly. You drugged my grandchildren. We're protecting them. Julia knows we have them. She'll come back, or she'll make contact. When she does, we'll resolve this situation. But if law enforcement gets involved, if this becomes public, there will be consequences you haven't considered." Philip took a step closer, his voice dropping. "We have documentation showing that Julia discussed involving your son in her theft. Conversations about using his legal expertise to hide the money. Text messages, recordings. Whether he knew about it or not, we can make it look like he did." Lucas's jaw clenched. "You're threatening my son. I'm telling you how things are. Your daughter-in-law has put everyone in a terrible position. We're trying to handle this privately, keep it in the family. But that requires cooperation." Philip's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Go home, Mr. Carver. Let's handle Julia. When she returns our money and our property, you'll get your grandchildren back unharmed. Make this public, and I promise you, your son will end up disbarred at minimum, in prison at worst." and the children will end up in state custody while the courts sort out which of their parents is the bigger criminal. Lucas stared at the man, his mind racing through scenarios and calculations. 30 years of investigative work had taught him to read people, to spot the tells of a liar. Philip Taylor wasn't lying, at least not about all of it. But there was more to this story, something darker beneath the surface. "I want to see them," Lucas said. "Not possible." "Then I make the call." Philip's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. Let me see my grandchildren are alive and unharmed, or I call the police and take my chances with whatever bullshit story you've cooked up about Michael." For a long moment, Philip stared at him. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Bring them to the door." A minute later, the door opened wider. Hannah Taylor appeared, holding Emma by the hand. The girl looked sleepy but alert, her eyes widening when she saw Lucas. Behind them, a younger man Lucas didn't recognize held Jack, who was more drowsy, his head resting against the man's shoulder. "Grandpa," Emma said, her voice small. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were frightened. "They're fine," Hannah said, her voice clipped. "Just tired. We're taking good care of them. Emma, Jack, I'll be back soon, okay?" Lucas kept his voice steady, reassuring. "Everything's going to be fine." Philip ushered Hannah and the children back inside, then turned to Lucas. "You have 24 hours. If Julia doesn't contact us by this time tomorrow, we'll have to take other measures. And if you try anything, going to the police, trying to force your way in here, we'll disappear with these children before you can blink. We have resources you don't understand." "I understand more than you think," Lucas said quietly. He walked back to his car, his mind already working through the problem. Once he was a safe distance away, he pulled over and made 3 calls. The first was to Michael. "We have a situation." By the time Lucas explained what he'd seen and what Philip had told him, Michael was already leaving the courthouse. "I knew something was wrong. Julie has been acting strange for months. Secretive, but I never thought. Where would she go? I don't know. She doesn't have family besides her parents. Her friends." Michael trailed off. "Wait, there's this guy, Brad Matthews. He used to work with her father. She mentioned him a few times recently. Said he'd been calling her about some business opportunity." Lucas filed the name away. "I need you to do something for me. Check your credit cards, bank accounts, anything Julia had access to. See if there's been any unusual activity. You think she really stole from them? I think your in-laws are running something illegal, and Julia either got caught up in it or tried to take advantage of it. Either way, those children are leverage, and we need to move fast." His second call was to Sidney Stout, a private investigator he'd worked with during his journalism days. Sidney had retired from the NYPD after 20 years and now ran a discreet investigation firm that specialized in cases that couldn't go through official channels. "Lucas Carver. Been a while." Sidney's gravelly voice came through. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind involving drugged grandchildren and criminal in-laws. I need deep background on Philip and Hannah Taylor, Westport. He's supposedly a retired pharmaceutical executive. I need to know what kind of business he was really in and what he's into now. How fast?" "Yesterday. It'll cost you. I'll pay double if you find something useful in the next 12 hours. His third call was to Alexander Fowler, a former FBI agent turned security consultant. Alex had helped Lucas on several investigations that had crossed into federal territory. If things escalated, having someone with federal connections might prove valuable. "Alex, I need advice on a hostage situation that can't go official." Yet, by the time Lucas returned home, Michael was already there, pacing in the living room. His son looked haggard, his suit rumpled, his normally composed courtroom demeanor cracked. "I checked everything," Michael said. "Julia withdrew $5,000 in cash from our joint account 3 days ago. That's it. If she stole $400,000 from her parents, it didn't go through any account I have access to." Lucas poured them both a whiskey. "Tell me about Brad Matthews." "He worked at her father's company, MediSource Solutions. Some kind of distribution executive. Julia mentioned he'd started his own consulting firm and wanted her to help with client relations. She seemed excited about it, said it could be lucrative." Michael ran his hand through his hair. "I didn't think much of it. She'd been wanting to work more since the kids started school. When did she start acting different?" About 3 months ago. More secretive with her phone. Going out for meetings that she wouldn't talk about. I thought maybe she was planning a surprise, or, I don't know, I try not to be paranoid. Michael's voice broke. What kind of husband doesn't notice his wife is falling into something this deep? The kind who trusts his wife, Lucas said. Don't do that to yourself. Right now, we focus on getting Emma and Jack back safely. Should we just pay them? I can liquidate investments, take out loans. It's not about the money. If it was, they'd have given us account numbers and deadlines. Philip wants Julia back, and he wants whatever she took. The money might be part of it, but I think there's something else. Documents, he said. Information. Lucas's phone buzzed. Sydney. That was fast, Lucas answered. You picked an interesting family to tangle with, Sydney said. Philip Taylor ran Medisor Solutions, which was a pharmaceutical distribution company. Sold it 5 years ago for $60 million. But here's the interesting part. 6 months before he sold, the FDA opened an investigation into the company for distributing controlled substances without proper documentation. The investigation was quietly closed after Medisource paid a 7-figure fine and agreed to enhanced oversight. Someone bought their way out. More like someone had connections. Hannah Taylor sat on the board of 3 major hospitals during that time. She was also connected to several state regulatory boards. The investigation went away, and suddenly Philip's selling the company for a fortune. What's he doing now? That's where it gets murky. He officially retired, but I found shell companies, LLCs registered in Delaware and Nevada. It looks like he's still in the distribution business, just more carefully hidden. I'll need more time to unpack it all, but my gut says he's running prescriptions through gray market channels. Keep digging. I need everything you can find on his current operation and any connection to Brad Matthews. After Sydney hung up, Lucas turned to Michael. Your in-laws are criminals. They were before, and they still are. Julia got involved, and either she tried to rip them off or she tried to get out. Either way, they're using your kids as insurance. Then we go to the police. We go to the FBI. And by the time they cut through the red tape, Philip and Hannah disappear with Emma and Jack. They said they have resources. I believe them. Lucas set down his glass. We have one advantage. They don't know who I am. Not really. They think I'm just a concerned grandfather. They don't know I spent 3 decades digging up dirt on people more powerful than them. What are you going to do? Find Julia before they do. Get leverage. And then make sure your in-laws never threaten this family again. Lucas spent the next hours reaching out to contacts, pulling threads, building a picture. By midnight, pieces started falling into place. Brad Matthews had indeed started a consulting firm, a front company that appeared to facilitate pharmaceutical sales to private clinics and wellness centers. The kind of operations that dealt in cash and didn't ask too many questions about prescription volume or oversight. Julia's phone records, which Sydney obtained through less than legal means, showed a pattern of calls to Matthews over the past 3 months. The last call was 2 days ago, lasting 17 minutes. The day before she disappeared. At 2 a.m., Sydney called again. Found something. Matthews has a property in upstate New York, near Lake George. Bought it 6 months ago under another LLC. Remote, private. If I were running and needed to lay low, that's where I'd go. Send me the address. Lucas, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I'm thinking my grandchildren have been drugged and are being held hostage by criminals. I'm thinking I have less than 20 hours before Philip Taylor makes good on his threats. And I'm thinking I need to find my daughter-in-law before this gets worse. Want backup? Not yet. If this goes sideways, I need you clean and able to act. Lucas grabbed his go bag, a habit from his journalism days, and headed for the door. Michael stood to follow. You need to stay here, Lucas said. If Julia reaches out to anyone, it'll be you. And if something happens to me, Emma and Jack will need their father. Dad, trust me. I've done this before. The drive to Lake George took 4 hours. Lucas arrived as dawn broke over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The property sat back from the main road, a modern cabin surrounded by trees. A rental car sat in the driveway. Lucas approached carefully, scanning for signs of security or surveillance. The cabin appeared quiet. He moved to a window and peered inside. Julia Taylor Carver sat at a kitchen table, her head in her hands. She looked exhausted, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, still wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago. Papers were spread across the table, documents, spreadsheets, what looked like financial records. A laptop sat open, its screen showing what appeared to be transaction histories. Lucas knocked on the door. Julia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. For a moment, she looked ready to run. Then she recognized him, and her expression crumbled into something like relief mixed with despair. She opened the door. Lucas. Oh God. How did you? I'm a journalist, Julia. Finding people is what I used to do. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. We need to talk, and we need to do it fast. Your parents have Emma and Jack. All color drained from Julia's face. No, they said they wouldn't. They drugged them, and they're holding them hostage until you return whatever you took. For $100,000 and some documents they seem very concerned about. Lucas's voice was hard. So you're going to tell me everything right now, and then we're going to figure out how to get those children back safely. Julia sank into a chair, her hands shaking. I never meant for this to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting my family. Start from the beginning. She took a breath, composing herself. My father's company, MediSource, it wasn't what everyone thought. He was distributing pharmaceutical drugs, yes, but he was also running a side operation. Controlled substances, prescription painkillers mostly diverted from legitimate channels and sold to clinics and pain management centers that were basically pill mills. My mother used her hospital connections to create false documentation, make it look legitimate. You knew about this? Not until 2 years ago. My father had a health scare, and I helped my mother with some paperwork. That's when I saw the real books, the shadow operations. When I confronted them, my father said it was just business, that everyone in the industry did it, that the regulations were too strict anyway. Julia's voice was bitter. He made it sound so reasonable, so normal. But you didn't walk away. I tried to. But then he offered me money. A lot of money. Just to help with some client relations, he said. Make introductions, facilitate meetings. I told myself it was harmless. Michael and I had student loans, a mortgage, the kids' school. I convinced myself I was just networking. When did Brad Matthews enter the picture? Julia's eyes widened. You know about Brad? I know he's connected. Keep talking. Brad used to work for my father. He learned the operation inside and out. 6 months ago, he approached me, said he was starting his own distribution network and wanted my help. He offered me a partnership, legitimate money for legitimate work. I saw it as a way out, a way to use what I'd learned but stay legal. Except it wasn't legal. No, it wasn't. Brad was doing the same thing my father did, just on a smaller scale and more carefully. But he convinced me his network was cleaner, that we could transition it into something legitimate. I believed him. She gestured to the papers. 3 months ago, I realized Brad was planning to take over my father's operation. He'd been documenting everything, every transaction, every shipment, every falsified document. He was building a case to blackmail my father, force him to hand over his contacts and supply chains. Lucas studied the documents spread across the table. Shipping manifests, financial transactions, names, and addresses. These are the documents Philip wants back. These are copies. Brad has the originals. He was going to make his move next week. But I couldn't let him do it. Not because I care about protecting my father. He's a criminal who deserves whatever he gets. But because if this came out, if there was a power struggle, people would get caught in the crossfire. Michael could be implicated just by association. The children could lose both parents. So you took the money and the evidence. I took the money from Brad's accounts. The $400,000 was what he'd been skimming from the operation to fund his takeover. I figured if I took his war chest, he couldn't make his move. And I took these copies to have leverage of my own, insurance to keep both Brad and my father from coming after my family. She met Lucas's eyes. I was going to disappear for a few days, let things cool down, then figure out how to get us all out safely. You didn't think your parents would take your children? I thought they'd be angry. I didn't think they'd. Her voice broke. They're my parents. How could they do that to their own grandchildren? Lucas thought of Philip's cold eyes, Hannah's practiced movements with the syringe. Money and power make people capable of terrible things. How involved is Brad right now? I don't know. We were supposed to meet yesterday, but I didn't show. He's probably trying to figure out what happened. Does he know about this place? No. This is a rental I booked under a fake name. I used cash. She looked at Lucas with desperate hope. Can you get Emma and Jack back? Please. I'll give my parents everything. I'll confess to anything. Just get my children his safety. Lucas's phone rang. Michael. Dad, Julia just called me. She's coming home. She said she's going to give the Taylors what they want. Lucas looked at Julia, who was staring at her phone with confusion. That wasn't me, she whispered. I didn't call him. Lucas's blood went cold. Michael, did you recognize her voice? Yeah, of course. It was definitely Julia. She sounded scared but said she was okay. Said she'd be at our house in 3 hours. Michael, listen to me very carefully. That wasn't Julia. Someone is impersonating her. Lucas's mind raced. Get out of the house. Right now. Go somewhere public and stay there. Call Alex Fowler. Tell him what I just told you. What's happening? They're making a move. Go. Now. Lucas hung up and turned to Julia. Who else knows about you and Brad's plan? Who else was involved? No one. It was just Brad and me, and I didn't even tell him I was taking the money until she stopped, realization dawning. Isabel. Brad's assistant. Isabel Cahill. She handles his logistics, his communications. She's the one who manages the technical side. Could she fake your voice? If she had recordings, samples. Brad and I had dozens of calls. If she's any good with audio software. Julia's hands went to her mouth. They're going to Michael's house. They think I'll be there, which means they're moving the children. Lucas was already dialing Sydney. I need you at the Taylor house in Westport right now. Watch for any movement. Don't engage, just follow and report. On my way. To Julia, pack everything. We need to move. Where are we going? To end this. But first, we need to make sure your parents can't run. 20 minutes later, they were heading south, Lucas driving while Julia made calls on burner phones he'd had in his go bag. First call is to the FDA tip line, Lucas instructed. Anonymous report about pharmaceutical distribution through Medisource and related companies. Provide enough detail to trigger an investigation, but not so much that it tips them off you're the source. Julia's hand shook as she dialed. Lucas listened as she provided information in a disguised voice, dates, company names, addresses of clinics, just enough to plant seeds. Second call is to Brad Matthews. Tell him you have the money and the documents. You want to meet. Somewhere public, somewhere with security cameras. He'll never fall for that. He will if you tell him your father is about to move against him, and this is his only chance to save his operation. Make him think you're picking his side. The call lasted 5 minutes. Brad was suspicious, but agreed to meet at a restaurant in Stamford that evening at 7. Sydney called as they crossed into Connecticut. The Taylors are loading the kids into a black Mercedes SUV. Hannah's driving. They've got bags. Looks like they're preparing to run. What do you want me? Stay on them. I need to know where they're taking Emma and Jack. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander Fowler. Michael is safe. What do you need? Lucas replied, stand by. May need federal involvement soon. They made one more stop before heading to Michael's house, a storage facility in Norwalk where Lucas had kept old case files, equipment, and evidence from his journalism days. He retrieved a waterproof case containing recording equipment, a video camera, and something else. Years' worth of notes and evidence on various criminal enterprises, including files on pharmaceutical fraud and distribution networks. His old instincts had made him keep detailed records on anything that might become relevant. Inside, he also had copies of documents he'd gathered during an investigation into pharmaceutical companies 5 years ago. He'd never published that story. The threats had been too credible, the sources too vulnerable. But he'd kept everything. What are we doing? Julia asked. Building leverage, Lucas said. Your father thinks he's the only one with cards to play. He's wrong. Michael's house was empty when they arrived. Lucas did a sweep, checking for signs of intrusion. Everything looked normal, which made him more suspicious. They'll have someone watching, he said, waiting to see if you show up. So what do we do? Lucas pulled out his phone and opened a video recording app. We give him a show. He positioned Julia in the living room, visible through the front window, and had her pace, looking distressed, checking her phone. All the while, his camera recorded from an angle that captured both Julia and, crucially, the street outside. After 15 minutes, a car pulled up 3 houses down. A man got out, young, athletic build, wearing a baseball cap. He walked past Michael's house slowly, hands in pockets, eyes on the windows. Lucas got clear footage of his face. The man made a call from down the street, talking briefly, then got back in his car and drove off. That was Brad's operation, Julia said. I recognize him. His name is Rob Coffey. He does security for Brad. So Brad and your father are working together now? Or they're both hunting you separately? Lucas downloaded the footage. Either way, they're coordinating. Sydney called again. The Taylors stopped at a house in Greenwich. Private property, gated. They took the kids inside. I've got the address. Text it to me. Keep eyes on the location. Lucas pulled up the address on his laptop. The property was registered to another LLC, this one connected to a name he recognized from his old pharmaceutical investigation. Julian Tompkins, a doctor who'd lost his medical license after being caught overprescribing opioids. The investigation had revealed he'd been working with distributors to run prescription mills. Your father's network runs deeper than you thought, Lucas said. Tompkins was a player in the pharma fraud world. If they're using his property, it means they have a fallback plan, a safe house. How do we get Emma and Jack out? Lucas thought through the angles. A direct assault was risky. They could hurt the children or disappear before he could reach them. Going to the police now would trigger exactly what Philip had warned. Legal chaos, custody battles, and the kids in limbo. No, he needed something cleaner. His phone rang. Alex Fowler. Lucas, I did some checking on Philip Taylor based on what you told me. His name came up in a closed investigation from 3 years ago. Federal task force looking into prescription drug diversion. They had evidence, but couldn't make charges stick. Who ran the investigation? FBI agent named Devin Nicholson. He's still working organized crime cases in the New York field office. I gave him a call, mentioned your name. He remembers your work on the Med for Corruption case. Says if you have solid evidence on active pharmaceutical distribution schemes, he'd be very interested in talking. How fast can he move? On credible evidence of child endangerment combined with federal drug charges? Very fast. Lucas looked at Julia. How good is the documentation you have? Complete. Transactions, suppliers, buyers, falsified prescriptions. Everything you need to prove systematic distribution fraud. And I know where Brad keeps the originals, in a safe at his office. Lucas made a decision. Alex, set up a meeting with Nicholson. 2 hours from now. I'll have evidence and a witness. What are you planning? To make sure everyone pays for what they've done. But first, I need to get those children to safety. He turned to Julia. You're going to call your father. Tell him you're ready to deal. You have the money and the documents, and you want to trade them for Emma and Jack. Neutral location, public place. He'll never agree to that. He will when you tell him Brad Matthews is making his move tonight, that Brad's already contacted the feds, and that this is his only chance to get ahead of it before everything collapses. Is that true? It will be true by the time we're done. Julia made the call. Philip answered on the second ring. I want my children back, Julia said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. I have your money and the documents. We can make an exchange. Philip's voice was cold. You've caused us a great deal of trouble, and I can cause more. Brad Matthews has the originals, and he's planning to go to the FBI tonight, but I can get them. I know where he keeps them, and I'm the only one who can access his office without raising alarms. She paused. Give me my kids back, and I'll get you everything. Copies, originals, all of it. You'll be clean. There was a long silence. Where? The parking garage at the Stanford Town Center. Level 3. 1 hour. You bring Emma and Jack. I bring the documents and the money. How do I know you'll deliver? Because if I don't, you'll come after my family. We both know that. This is the only way everyone walks away. Another pause. 1 hour. Come alone. If I see anyone else, your husband, your father-in-law, anyone, you'll never see your children again. Julia hung up and looked at Lucas with terrified eyes. What now? Now we make sure that everyone who needs to be there is there. Sydney will follow your parents to the garage. Alex will have federal agents positioned nearby. You'll go to the meeting, but you won't be alone. You just won't be obviously accompanied. What about the documents? I don't have the originals. We're going to get them. Where exactly does Brad keep them? His office in Stanford, third floor of a business complex. He has a safe behind a painting in his private office. The combination is his daughter's birthday, September 15th, 2018. Lucas called Sydney and gave him new instructions. Then he called Alex. Is your FBI contact ready to move? He's mobilizing a team now. But Lucas, he needs probable cause to raid these locations. He'll have it. I'm about to deliver a witness, physical evidence, and documentation of ongoing criminal enterprise. Plus child endangerment. That enough? More than enough. What do you need from me? Be at the Stanford Town Center parking garage, level 3, in 45 minutes. Stay out of sight. Things are going to move fast. The next hour was a carefully orchestrated dance. Lucas drove Julia to Brad Matthews' office building, which was quiet on a Saturday afternoon. Using techniques he'd learned during his journalism career, Lucas picked the office lock, a skill he'd acquired during investigations where sources suddenly became uncooperative and doors mysteriously locked. Brad's office was exactly as Julia described. The safe was behind a painting of a sailboat. Lucas worked the combination, and the safe swung open. Inside were the original documents, everything Brad had collected on the Taylor operation, plus additional files on his own distribution network. Transaction records, communications, names of doctors and clinic operators. It was comprehensive enough to bring down multiple operations. Lucas photographed everything with his phone, then loaded the originals into a briefcase. We're going to give copies to your father, Lucas said. But the originals are going to the FBI. Won't that implicate me too? You're going to cooperate. You're going to be a witness. That's how you protect yourself and Michael. You made mistakes, but you were trying to get out, and you're willing to testify against the real criminals. They drove to the parking garage, arriving 15 minutes early. Lucas positioned himself on level 4, where he could see level 3 through the gaps in the concrete structure. Sydney was already in position, his van parked 2 levels down with a clear sight line. Alex had federal agents staged in unmarked cars on the perimeter, ready to move in on signal. At exactly the appointed time, the black Mercedes SUV pulled onto level 3. Hannah Taylor got out first, scanning the area. Then Philip emerged from the driver's side, opening the back door. Emma and Jack climbed out, looking sleepy and confused. Julia walked forward from where she'd been waiting near the stairwell, carrying the briefcase with the documents and a bag with the cash. Let me see them, Julia said, her voice echoing in the concrete space. Show us what you brought, Philip countered. Lucas watched the exchange, his phone recording everything. Julia opened the briefcase, showing the documents. Philip's eyes scanned them, his expression calculating. And the money? Julia opened the bag, revealing stacks of cash. Let the children go, Julia said. Not until we verify these are complete. Philip gestured to Hannah, who pulled out a phone and started photographing pages. That's when a second car pulled into the garage, a dark sedan that Lucas immediately recognized as Brad Matthews' vehicle. Brad got out, along with Rob Coffey and another man. Nobody move, Brad said, his voice carrying across the garage. He had a gun in his hand. Philip's eyes widened. What are you doing here? Protecting my interests. You think I didn't know about your little meeting? You think I don't have eyes on your operation? Brad advanced slowly, his attention on the briefcase. Those are mine. I spent months compiling that evidence. You mean the evidence you were going to use to blackmail us? Philip's voice was venomous. You're a fool, Matthews. And you're a dinosaur. Your operation is too visible, too risky. I was doing you a favor by taking it over. Julia moved between them and the children, her body shielding Emma and Jack. Nobody's taking anything, Julia said. This ends now. All of you are done. Brad laughed. You're not in a position to make demands. That's when Lucas made his move. He'd timed it perfectly with Alex, who had been listening via an open phone line. At Lucas's signal, federal agents swarmed into the parking garage from 3 different entry points, their vehicles blocking all exits. FBI, drop your weapons. Everyone on the ground. The garage erupted into chaos. Brad's hand went toward his gun, but Rob Coffey grabbed his arm, hissing something. Philip stood frozen, his face pale. Hannah grabbed for the children, but Julia had already pulled them behind a concrete pillar. Lucas descended from level 4, walking calmly through the confusion to where Julia crouched with Emma and Jack. "Grandpa," Emma cried, throwing her arms around him. "I've got you," Lucas said, hugging both children tightly. "You're safe now." Federal agents secured the scene, separating the players, collecting the evidence. Agent Devin Nicholson, a stern-faced man in his 40s, approached Lucas. "Mr. Carver, I've heard a lot about your investigative work." "Agent Nicholson, I have a witness ready to cooperate fully. Original documentation of a pharmaceutical distribution conspiracy spanning at least 5 years, and you've just arrested some of the key players." "I'm aware. Your friend Fowler briefed me on the situation." Nicholson glanced at Julia and the children. "The witness will need to come in for formal debriefing." "She will. But first, she needs to get her children to their father, and they all need medical evaluation. Those kids were drugged." Nicholson's expression hardened. "We'll get paramedics here immediately." As EMTs arrived to check on Emma and Jack, Lucas watched Philip and Hannah Taylor being placed in handcuffs, along with Brad Matthews and his associates. Philip's eyes met Lucas's across the garage, filled with impotent rage. "You have no idea what you've done," Philip said. "I know exactly what I've done," Lucas replied. "I protected my family." Michael arrived just as the paramedics were finishing their evaluation of the children. He swept Emma and Jack into his arms, tears streaming down his face. Julia stood apart, uncertain, guilt written across her features. Michael looked at her, his expression complex, hurt, anger, relief, confusion. "We need to talk, but not here and not now. Right now, I just need to hold our kids." Julia nodded, wiping her own tears. Agent Nicholson pulled Lucas aside. "We're going to need Mrs. Carver's testimony to build our case. She'll likely face charges herself for her involvement, but given her cooperation and the circumstances, I'll recommend leniency." "She was trying to protect her family from both sides of a criminal conspiracy," Lucas said, "and she's provided evidence that will take down multiple operations." "Understand, but there will be consequences." "Fair consequences," Lucas agreed. "That's all we're asking for." Over the next 2 weeks, the case expanded beyond anything Lucas had initially imagined. The documents Brad had collected, combined with Julia's testimony and Lucas's own investigation, revealed a network of pharmaceutical fraud that stretched across 3 states and involved dozens of clinics, distributors, and corrupt medical professionals. Philip and Hannah Taylor were charged with conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, fraud, and child endangerment. Brad Matthews faced similar charges, along with attempted blackmail and weapons violations. Others in the network began falling like dominoes as the FBI followed the evidence trails. Julia accepted a plea deal, probation and community service in exchange for full cooperation. Her medical license would be suspended, and she'd have a criminal record, but she'd avoided prison time. The judge, hearing the full context of her situation, acknowledged that she'd ultimately made the right choice in exposing the operation, even if she'd gone about it in a dangerous way. Michael and Julia's marriage was strained, but not broken. They started counseling, working through the betrayals and secrets. For Emma and Jack's sake, they were trying to rebuild trust. Lucas sat in his study one evening 3 weeks after the parking garage confrontation, organizing his notes. Michael appeared in the doorway, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. "Thought you might need this," Michael said, handing his father a glass. "How are the kids?" "Better. The therapist says they're resilient. They don't fully understand what happened, just that they're safe now. Emma keeps asking if Grandma and Grandpa Taylor will come back." "What do you tell her?" "The truth, in age-appropriate terms. That they made bad choices and have to face consequences." Michael sat down. "I never thanked you properly. You saved my children's lives. I did what any grandfather would do." "No." Michael shook his head. "Most people would have called the police immediately, or paid the ransom, or panicked. You stayed calm, you investigated, you built a strategy. You turned a hostage situation into a federal case that took down a criminal network. That's not what any grandfather would do. That's what you would do. Lucas sipped his whiskey. I spent 30 years exposing corruption and crime. I thought I was done with that world. Turns out the skills don't fade. Julia asked me to tell you something. She's too ashamed to say it directly, but she wants you to know she's sorry. For putting us all in danger, for being so stupid and greedy. Her words, not mine. She made mistakes, but she also tried to fix them in her own misguided way. And when it mattered, she chose her family over the money. Lucas met his son's eyes. That count for something, does it? Yes. People aren't defined by their worst moments, Michael. They're defined by what they do next. Julia's cooperating. She's in therapy. She's trying to rebuild. That's what matters. Michael was quiet for a moment. The FBI agent, Nicholson, he called me yesterday, said your testimony and the evidence you gathered were crucial to the case. Said without your investigation, they might not have been able to connect all the pieces. I just did what needed to be done. He also said you should have been a federal agent instead of a journalist. Said you have instincts most trained investigators don't develop. Lucas smiled slightly. I was too mouthy for the FBI. They like following rules. I preferred exposing the people who broke them. What happens now? Do you go back to retirement? Reading books on your porch? I don't know. This reminded me why I love the work. Finding the truth, protecting people, making sure the bad guys face consequences. Lucas looked at his son, but it also reminded me what's most important. Family. Being there when you're needed. You were always there when I needed you, Dad. Even when I didn't realize I needed you. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking whiskey, processing everything that had happened. Lucas's phone buzzed. Sydney Stout. Turn on the news, Sydney said. Channel 12. Lucas switched on the television. A breaking news report showed federal agents raiding multiple locations across Connecticut and New York. The anchor reported a major pharmaceutical distribution conspiracy had been broken up with dozens of arrests. Footage showed Philip Taylor being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs. In a related development, the anchor continued. The FDA has announced enhanced oversight procedures for pharmaceutical distributors, citing the case as an example of systemic failures in prescription drug monitoring. Lucas turned off the television. Sometimes the system works, when you give it the right push. A month later, Emma and Jack's school held a Grandfather's Day event. Lucas attended, watching as Emma proudly introduced him to her friends. "This is my grandpa Lucas," she said. "He's a hero. He saved us from the bad people." Lucas knelt down to her level. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just your grandpa who loves you very much." "Miss Carver says heroes are people who help others when they're in trouble," Emma insisted. "That's you." Later, as Lucas walked the children to their father's car, Jack tugged on his sleeve. "Grandpa, are the bad people gone forever?" Lucas thought about Philip and Hannah Taylor, awaiting trial in federal custody. About Brad Matthews, who was cooperating with prosecutors to reduce his own sentence. About the clinics and distributors who'd been shut down, the doctors who'd lost their licenses, the network that had been dismantled. "Yes," Lucas said, "they're gone, and they can't hurt you anymore." That night, Lucas received an email from Agent Nicholson. "Mr. Carver, the case against the Taylor Distribution Network is proceeding well. Your daughter-in-law's testimony has been invaluable, and the evidence you gathered has allowed us to pursue charges against 17 additional defendants. I wanted you to know that the federal task force has officially closed this case as solved, with significant criminal enterprise dismantled. The children involved have been confirmed safe, with ongoing counseling support. On a personal note, I've worked many cases in my career, but rarely have I seen a civilian investigation conducted with such precision and effectiveness. If you're ever interested in consulting work, the Bureau could use someone with your skills and instincts. Thank you for your service to justice. Special Agent Devin Nicholson." Lucas smiled and filed the email away. Then he opened a new document on his laptop and began typing. Case notes. The Taylor Distribution Network. Final observations. Criminal enterprises thrive on secrecy, intimidation, and the assumption that victims won't fight back. They rely on fear, keeping people silent and isolated. But when someone refuses to be afraid, When someone methodically exposes their operations and builds a case against them, even the most sophisticated criminals fall. The Taylor case demonstrated several key principles. 1. Family is worth any risk. 2. Preparation and investigation trump impulsive action. 3. Building leverage is more effective than direct confrontation. 4. Cooperation with legitimate authorities, when properly timed, can turn a hostage situation into a criminal prosecution. Most importantly, never underestimate what a grandfather will do to protect his grandchildren. He saved the document and closed his laptop. Through the window, he could see the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in Connecticut, his son was putting his children to bed, reading them stories, making sure they felt safe. Julia would face her own reckoning in the courts, but she'd also have the chance to rebuild her life, to be the mother her children deserved. That was more than Philip and Hannah Taylor would get, more than Brad Matthews would get. They'd chosen greed and power over family, and they'd paid the price. Lucas poured himself one last whiskey and walked out to his porch. The autumn air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and with smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. He thought about retirement, about quiet days reading books and working in his garden. He'd earned that peace. But he also thought about the email from Agent Nicholson, about consulting work, about the possibility of using his skills again when they were needed. The truth was Lucas Carver had discovered something during those terrifying weeks when his grandchildren were in danger. The instincts of an investigator never really fade. They just wait, dormant, until someone needs them. And if someone else threatened his family, those instincts would rise again, sharp and ready. But for now, he would enjoy his whiskey, his quiet evening, and the knowledge that Emma and Jack were safe, that justice had been served, and that the bad guys had lost. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.